Well, it's really great to be here with Joe Haas, who's somebody who, from the moment you hit town, I have thought is a true breakthrough leader here at the Guthrie. So great to be here with you.
Thanks, RT. It's an honor to be here with you, friend.
You know, a lot of times these days when people are sitting with leaders of any arts organization, they'll say something to the effect, well, you've always been about the art. Now are you thinking more about how the art fits into society and the social justice movements? I could ask you that, but it would be absurd because you've been talking about that way before George Floyd was murdered, way before a lot of the deeper reckoning's gone on. That to me has been a big part of your work. I'm going to start instead in a different place, which is you've always been about putting Guthrie's work in the context of what's going on in society. How has that changed now as the whole world has changed so much?
Yeah, well, it's good to have a lot more allyship in the cause. It's good to have a lot more people awakened or reawakened or further awakened to the need to create a more just, a more equitable, a better community and society. And we believe, as you know, I've long believed, that the arts have a really important role to play in those conversations. So, you know, the Guthrie has made strides in recent years that I think we can be proud of. And also categorically, the Guthrie has not done enough. And so I think there's great reckoning that society is undergoing now as we consider many of these questions around equity, who gets to participate, whose voices are at the table, through whose lens do we see this story or that story. I think it's just further amplified, and I think for the work that the Guthrie has done, I think we simply haven't done enough. You know, after George Floyd was murdered, I gathered some Twin Cities black theater artists, some who've been in this community for decades and decades, and some who are as recent as a BFA student at the University of Minnesota. And you know, it was humbling and also very beautiful and constructive. And realizing that we haven't done enough with the black community, we simply haven't. And so we moved rapidly to do, in the time when we were shut down, to move resource and support to black artists in this community, to amplify black voices and artists, particularly those who had something to say in relation to this murder of George Floyd. And that was good. And then the longer term is we've just collected what is finally a document of some 60 pages. This is We See You White American Theater, which were a list of demands that had come to our larger, historically white theater institution saying, this is the change we want and need. And then conversations across the field with Black Theater United, the 10 Chimney Summit, many, many, many conversations we had, and we collected all of this. And then we summarized all of it, and we put them in areas of focus. Here's what everybody's telling us around artistic and programming. Here's what everyone's talking to us about in terms of governance. Here's what everyone's talking to us about in terms of community. And then with the board and staff together, we worked in these sort of task forces along these verticals, and we've come to 3 to 5 priorities that we are going to be transparent and accountable about in each of those verticals. And that's going on the website in the next couple of weeks. And it's not everything, but it's a lot. And I think if the Guthrie can do the things we say we're going to do over these next few years, we will have moved the needle meaningfully for our own organization. And we will be transparent and we will be accountable to those. I wouldn't be surprised if we missed on one or more of them for any reason, and we'll be transparent about that as well. So I think it has furthered our work. It has amplified all of it, all of the work in that space. And I feel that I have a still more willing board and staff and community for that work, which is encouraging. I mean, it is my great hope, as challenging as this time is, it's my great hope that we're all going to come through it as a better and stronger community for having committed to this work.
So walk us out like 5 years, and through the lens of a person who comes to Guthrie as a play, and then through the lens of let's say a black artist in town. How will the Guthrie feel and be different then?
Yeah, you know, talking about 5 years from now, like, that would have been a lunatic exercise in the before times. Now I'm just trying to go like April, like is there a path? You know, so it's real hard. It's real hard to know. You know, programmatically, again, more stories. Whose voices are on the stage? We can do more. But a lot of it's structural. A lot of it is internal. Internal is not the right word. Some of it is in places that an audience member, if you come and see, they don't necessarily see firsthand. Like, what does our administrative staff look like? Yeah. What does our board of trustees look board of directors look like? It's in some of those places where I think the Guthrie can really, really do a lot of good work. And you know, it is a criticism of institutional theaters in this country that it is, I can't think of one theater of size in any community in this country where the demography of the people who work for the organization matches the demography of the town in which they reside. I can't think of one. And so we have work to do to close that gap here at the Guthrie, and we're committed to it.
Yeah. You know, you used the word institution in there. You guys are coming up to your 60th anniversary. Yeah. Minneapolis Foundation, more than 100 years old. You know, we both have these legacy organizations that also, certainly in our case, has an aspiration to be dramatically evolving over time.
Yeah.
Certainly you've already shown that, but how do you navigate that as you're trying to lead this institution about what is the through line of consistency through 60 and maybe 60 more years, and where do you move?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I really love that question because I think you have to lead the organization that you lead. I'd have a different answer if I ran a different theater, but I run this theater, and next year is the Guthrie's 60th anniversary. And so I think a lot about what the Guthrie, what we are preparing for, what tools are we giving, how are we building stability, so there's a Guthrie 50 years from now, long after I'm gone. And so these legacy organizations, yeah, of course one wants leadership, and of course one wants vision and direction for the organization, but there is a role that's a stewardship role. You know, when we think about growing the endowment at the Guthrie meaningfully, we know that for current staff, even current community, that means planting seeds for trees under whose shade we are not going to sit under, but somebody else will if we do our work correctly. So no small part of my reflection and thinking are about the long-term health of this very, very important organization. And we have to make sure that we're putting the pieces in place to know that there's a thriving Guthrie that is meaningful and connected to this community that we're charged to serve a half century from now. And that's much on my mind.
Let's talk about that sustainability, because, you know, there's sometimes, it seems in life, where simply remaining standing is a victory. So first up, congratulations. The Guthrie has made it through this period of time. No small feat. Little insight into how you've done that, and also about how those of us who want to make sure this is another 60 years at least, what should we be doing to help perpetuate the Guthrie right now? Yeah,
well, thank you for that question. I mean, our community, the philanthropic community in Minnesota is astounding, and the support that has been lent to us over these last couple of years is what has allowed us to survive, and also puts us in a position to thrive. I mean, we are planning for our 22-23 season beginning next September, the coming September. We're planning a full Guthrie season. And in the shutdown, when there was no end in sight and there was no vaccine in sight and we couldn't make plays, we let some 200 people go from this organization. A savage, terrible, terrible time. And our promise to one another was that when we came back, we're not going to come back making 2- and 3-person plays for 5 years in order to figure out the path. We're going to come back and we're going to look like ourselves, hopefully a better version of ourselves, but coming back at a level of scale in terms of dreams, ambition of artists, getting those on stage, getting as many artists and artisans and administrators and all the people who make this thing go, getting folks to work and creating opportunities for as many people as possible has been a guiding focus. Yeah. We've been very fortunate with the philanthropic community in Minnesota. You may know about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which we were able to inflect as that legislation was being written, and we were able to participate in as those monies were distributed. And
it's were the federal dollars that came through.
Correct. These are federal dollars that have come. The single largest federal support of the arts in this nation's history, and done across the aisle through our own Amy Klobuchar here in Minnesota and Senator Cornyn of Texas, working across the aisle, created a kind of legislation which I think 50 years from now we'll look back as having saved the cultural arts sector in this country. And Senator Klobuchar being our own senator here, many, Dana Frank, others in the community, the Guthrie were able to participate in helping to get the language in there that allowed, originally the scope of that was to simply support for-profit concert venues, and it grew and grew and grew until it became sort of the cultural sector writ large. But I will say, how beautiful is it that we could work across the aisle in that way, because in the end, what is suggested by what happened is that Americans, period, Americans, left, right, wherever you are, Americans value the arts. They remind us, it's not just how to live, but why. Anyway, so I think watching legislators work across the aisle to get that sort of legislation passed, signaling that the arts are important. It's part of being an American citizen. It's part of being in this country. It's the ability to participate in the arts in a meaningful way. And so we were very grateful for that. All that said, in the shutdown, we lost $28 million of earned revenue. Yeah. And by scaling back as much as we did and rapidly rebuilding now in order to prosecute the season we're in and to plan for next year, I'm hopeful we're going to be okay in all of this.
I'm going to check out a theory as I talk to different leaders about this, but I'm going to run it by you. The inklings that I begin to hear as a through line in what's happened with cultural institutions is that the major philanthropists stayed in place. The real hit came with people who were sort of connected. Season ticket, maybe 1 or 2 tickets a year, maybe 1 ticket every other year. Yeah. That, the beginning member of a museum or other, that seems to be the deepest hit so far, if I could do a through line without doing deep conversations.
I characterize it, and of course I take you fully at your word that that's how it's playing out for others. I'm not sure that describes our circumstance.
Yeah. I just gave you a hack theory, so don't take it too seriously.
I think the first half of that absolutely correlates to the Guthrie's experience. Our significant donors, the people who have cared in such a way in the past, continued to care about us through this time. That's for sure. We have grown individual donors by thousands.
Wow.
Over the course of the pandemic. Many of them very small gifts, very, very modest gifts, $25 here, $100 there, which is still is as meaningful to me when I know many of those people don't have a lot of extra to think about in the first place and have chosen to support the Guthrie.
What's that about? That's really a great story.
I think it has something to do, so again, a theory, only a theory, I really don't know. In 1963, when Tyrone Guthrie started this theater and the years running up to it, they went all over the state of Minnesota. And they built that first theater with discrete gifts from all over the state, including very sweetly $5.37 from a Sunday school in Mankato. So the Guthrie belongs to the citizens of Minnesota. I've said over and over again, the Guthrie was built by the citizens of Minnesota as a gift to themselves. So I think there is something about this organization that is meaningful to folks. Even if they come only very occasionally, they understand the importance of the Guthrie in the sort of arts universe where we reside. So that was huge for us. A big concern for us going forward, and I'd be very interested in your view, in the before times, in 2016, when I look at the level of corporate funding that came into this organization in 2016, and I look at where we are today, corporate support at the Guthrie, I don't know if you're seeing this more generally, is 50% what it was in 2016. And I'm dismayed by that. Is it Ken Dayton who said that what differentiates Minneapolis from Omaha is the arts? I mean, it's the arts are a huge thing in this town. And when you think of those corporations, our extraordinary large corporations in this town, and they recruit talent and they maintain, sustain talent, by inviting folks into, among other things, a community that has a thriving arts landscape. And there was a time when the corporations in this town, we were the envy of the world for how corporations cared for the arts here in the Twin Cities in particular. And watching corporations, I don't think any of them are becoming, to be very clear of what I find challenging, I don't think any of these corporations have become less philanthropic at all. It's how they're distributing that philanthropy.
Largely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it in a couple of ways. One is, there's the argument that some of those Fortune 500 companies are more global than they were a generation before, and they're being challenged by their trustees to be philanthropic everywhere they are, and not just where home base may be, and I think that's fair. And I think we see many more corporations pulling their philanthropy into their areas of market. In other words, General Mills goes, we make food, there are hungry people, maybe our philanthropy should be aligned to that. It's hard to argue with this, right? It simply is hard to argue with this. But also, philanthropy ought not to be advertising, and philanthropy ought to be considering the community and the broader community and how the arts play in that. And so watching our major corporations retreat from that space is a huge concern for us, and it puts even more pressure and hope that individuals will move into that space and help us be as robust as we have been and serving as many as we serve.
Well, what your read on it, from what I can see from my vantage point at the foundation, is absolutely totally true. And it's frightening, and there are also individuals from some of those businesses. You mentioned Ken Dayton. Only now do I really understand fully what he and Judy Dayton did for many, many institutions, including this one in town, on these sort of legacy things. And you talked about that idea that people often said that the arts were the difference between, Minneapolis would be a cold Omaha. Yeah. As you know, because your wife does work in
That's
Omaha,
exactly right.
There is now probably more corporate support for the arts in Omaha per capita than here.
Yeah.
So we got to own that.
There may well be. But to the point, the impact of corporations bending away from us is enormously impactful. And we have to find a way to balance against that. And of course, the last place you want to go is just to keep pushing up the price of tickets, which of course puts us off mission and doesn't allow us to have as many access points to this organization as we currently have.
Well, one final question, and it I think really relates back to this whole point about you talking about the history of the Guthrie and how that road show across the state really kicked it off. And Charlie Zelli, whose dad was really central to that, told me about that, about how the Guthrie really went out and built this statewide network. So now along comes this period where we have this great urban-rural divide. Pandemic comes and all that. It was really moving to see the Guthrie and you step up and say that your responsibility now was not just to the Guthrie, but to arts groups around the state.
That's right.
Tell us a bit about the Come to Wonder effort.
Yeah, so this Come to Wonder effort, which is the tentative name for this campaign that's not yet been rolled out, it all comes out of, early in the pandemic when none of us knew anything. We were shut down and we were like, don't tell us we have to stay closed for more than 6 weeks. Like, we really thought it would be a more near term, but we were all panicked and we didn't know what to think. And Mary Cerruti at the Walker Arts Center gathered a group of organizational leaders here so that we can kind of learn from one another and try to understand from one another what's going on. And that group began to meet regularly and brought in, Governor Walz came and spoke with us. The epidemiologist Michael Osterholm came and spoke with us. Tina Smith came and talked with us, Senator Tina Smith. And trying to understand the lay of the land, where we saw this going, how it was all happening. And that group continued to convene over the course of many, many months. And began to expand from what began as mostly or only Twin Cities arts organizations. It began to extend across the state, across all disciplines too, in the arts. And so in the end, there's this extraordinary coalition of folks, all of whom, in my view, have known and liked and admired each other, but rarely had opportunity to sit and talk in the world of Zoom. Begin to really understand there are so many shared interests here. And then, of course, the central interest of every one of these organizations is serving the communities of Minnesota. And so beginning to realize, like, there's some work we could do collectively to boost the signal about arts, whatever that might be and wherever that organization might be in Minnesota. So this is really an exciting time. And I know the group is seeking funding to roll out a campaign in order to shine a light on the arts and how they are fun and good and useful to the lives that we lead as Minnesotans across the state. So I'm really excited about, there's something very galvanizing about working not just across organizations, but across disciplines in the arts to create still greater interest and participation in the work that we do.
Well, thanks, Joe. Really appreciate all that you do.
You are too, and all that you do at the foundation. Thank you, friend. Appreciate you.